Captain's Log Supplemental. Our patrol mission of the neutral zone border has been going smoothly until yesterday. We had stopped to investigate an anomalous signal we were picking up from the third planet in the Yadala system. When we went to investigate the system, our away team came upon a very curious scene. A large red and white striped tent was set up in a clearing in the middle of a dense forest. As the away team approached the tent, what appeared to be a man dressed in multicolor regalia emerged from the tent and came up to the team. Came up maybe understating it, as he apparently tumbled and danced his way toward my first officer and greeted him by squirting him with a fake flower pinned to his chest. It was at this point that my first officer contacted the ship and simply stated, "I don't do clowns," and requested the immediate transport of the away team back to the ship. It became clear that he had made the correct decision when, after the away team returned, a member of the Q Continuum appeared in my ready room and declared my crew and ship no fun, and that he was going to go make Data a real boy. Hopefully my message to Captain Picard is received before Q arrives.
Everybody, welcome to Captain's Log Supplemental. I am Stanford. Joining me, as usual, is we have Rob.
Hello.
Good talk. I'll see you out there. And then Chris Emmerich.
Hello there.
How are we doing tonight?
Oh, pretty good.
Doing well. How about you?
Can't complain. And actually, on that note, I was just talking with Chris a minute while you were you getting ready there, Rob, but I think we both are in agreement that this might be the first episode of this show that's actually not bad. I'm not going to go say it's great, but it's certainly substantially more watchable.
Yeah, I go ahead, Rob.
So yes, 100% absolutely. I have it in my notes. This is the first time I have watched this show and felt like, okay, it's Star Trek.
It's Star Trek. And it was I got done watching it and I'm like, that was enjoyable.
It was.
So we are on episode 8 of season 1 of Enterprise of this chronological rewatch podcast. The title of this episode, as Chris very lovingly pointed out, was what again? I already forgot.
Breaking the Ice.
Breaking the Ice, which I guess that makes sense, yeah. I'll dig into the summary and then we'll go from there. So our cold open on this particular episode is surprisingly relevant to the rest of the episode in a fun way. They actually kind of kept it all together, which is probably part of why this episode worked so well. Although that's a low bar. But we start with, apparently a bunch of kids have sent drawings to the Enterprise in a little care package, which is very fun. It might be because I'm a parent and because I'm an older brother, but I fucking love kids' drawings.
Mm. You did neglect to mention, though, that this goes, this takes place in, of course, the mess hall.
Yep. I was just going to say...
Yes,
it's another start in the mess hall.
We have to open up with some food. Yeah. Everybody's eating.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I agree. The children's drawings are always fun, especially if you've had children of your own and they have chosen to draw art of you. That is always a good time.
So because I'm in the wheelchair, all of my kids' art of me features wheels. So it's very easy to tell which little stick figure is me.
Sure.
When he was real little,
I never thought about that.
Yeah. When he was real little, it was just wheels on the feet, like I was rolling around like on roller skates.
You just had wheelies on. That's all.
Yeah. So we are dropping out of warp, and Archer comes onto the comm like a small child, giddy in a candy store, to tell everyone to quick look out the portholes and see the comet. I'm sorry. It's a comet.
Yeah, I was going to say he did his best airline pilot impression there.
He didn't say enough.
That's
I don't know, man. I don't fault him for being excited here. How many opportunities do you think a typical human, even in the time frame that we're talking about, has the opportunity to see a stellar object up close like this?
Well, you know,
that's not Earth.
That's interesting, and I pretty much agree with you there. But I thought it was interesting later in this episode where he referenced time that he had actually spent on other like Vulcan ships.
Yeah,
at least one.
Yeah, one of them in which he set up the telescopes so that they could see like an antimatter nebula. But no. Tell me how exciting this fucking comet is. And plus, like, that would be true if we were on just like an interstellar passenger ship or like Travis in his family's like hauler or whatever. But these are people specifically out to observe stellar phenomena. Like,
but it's the biggest comet, dude. It's
the
chonkiest boy.
So before we get back to
82.6 kilometers.
Before we get to that, we got a little bit of faith of the heart.
Faith of the heart.
I'm touching my ear right now. So we get back to them describing this comet. It's 82.6 kilometers. It is later in the episode described as bigger than any comet humans have ever seen, which, and because I am this kind of person, I actually looked this up, okay? And we're going to get a little bit more into this in the deep dive today, but what is interesting about that statement is it was true when the episode was written. It was no longer true a year later.
Oh, neat.
Oh.
Because I looked up, like, what are the biggest comets? And, like, the biggest comet right now was found in 2014. It's 120 kilometers in diameter, as opposed to this one's 82.6. However, a comet named, and I was trying to figure out, like, my dumbass was like, when was this comet found? It's called C2002 VQ94. Yeah, the 2002 would be when it was cataloged. 100 kilometers across. Wow. So I don't fault the writers for like, I guess I fault them for their lack of imagination on how big comets could get.
Right.
But at the time they're like 86. Now 82.6, to give you a reference, the Hale-Bopp comet, which is like one comet enough that most people know the name, is 60 kilometers. So it's big, but it's not like, oh my God, huge, right? 82.6. So, however, as kind of our B plot, is it the B plot? I'm not even sure what the A or B plot here is. Actually, I would say it's the A plot. I feel like the comet's almost the B. But T'Pol gets some kind of message, and it makes her, well, I can't say emotional because she's a Vulcan, but the camera does linger on her emotionless face for an uncomfortably long time while some sad music swells.
I was going to say, so I thought that was actually pretty interesting, is because obviously she's Vulcan, so she doesn't display emotion. So they inserted emotion into the scene using music.
Yes. Yes.
Just like church.
It's like usually accompanying the acting, but it's like, nope, the music is doing the acting in this scene.
And not to fault the actor playing T'Pol, because like they're supposed to be Vulcan, but
they had to do it that way.
It is so uncomfortable to watch.
Yeah.
So they cut to a scene where I'm guessing after the commercial break, based on how the music swelled, they come back to Tripp's having kind of a late night in the mess. And he's working on something.
So, speaking of the mess hall here, I thought it was interesting they had kind of like a very automat dispenser like style, like grab your plate of pie. Like it was very like 50s automat to me, which I don't remember seeing in there before.
You see it a few times in Enterprise. I don't know if I've seen it before. No, Phlox got something off like a counter.
Right? Yeah.
So I'm assuming this is like the late night. Like to spend like the chef made a few pecan pies, which fucking that looked amazing. I was so hungry after watching that. The chef made a few pecan pies, sliced it into slices, and threw them in the little grab and go so that he could like clock out for the night. Which is kind of interesting.
Reminded me of Fallout.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. Like that 50s automat style. Yeah.
Although what's kind of interesting is that like. That's the first time we get the sense that, like, I guess the mess is not a 24-hour operation because, like, I assume there's a relatively full night crew as well. Do they not get lunch? Do they just have to eat, like, whatever sandwiches or whatever the chef threw together?
Guess I'm eating pecan pie for lunch.
So I was kind of wondering that too. The way that they talk about it, like especially when they're talking about, like when Archer's talking to the kids a little later on, they make it sound like there's just one chef. because he kept referring to him as the chef.
Sure,
Maybe
but
sous chefs.
there's one chef, but there's probably a couple of cooks underneath him, right?
Yeah, you'd think.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
So the chef's the one making the menu, but I assume there's more than one person. Because, I mean, the ship, did we ever look up what the complement of this ship was? But it's got to be like several dozen people at least.
There's a good number of people. Now I gotta look.
Yeah, someone look that up while I keep going. The other thing about the mess hall I wanted to point out that, like, I don't know why. It all started because Captain Picard in Next Generation was like, tea, Earl Grey, hot, right? Because that's how we're going to talk to computers in the future. But I appreciate that you have to, when you go up to the synthesizer or the juice dispenser, there's no real clear sense of what it is. Trip has to go like milk, cold, and then it pours him a glass of milk. And then T'Pol goes...
serve hot milk?
Green. Well, and I'm like, warm milk is a thing, so okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then T'Pol goes up and goes like, tea, green, hot, or whatever.
Green tea hot. I thought was so like that's got to be like a nod to Picard though, right?
Sure, and I'm assuming it is, but my question is like, are there not just default options? Like if you want milk, you just ask for milk, but if you want hot milk, you call it hot milk. And we know that the synthesizer has settings that are pre-programmed into it because they didn't tell it what kind of cup they were using, but the synthesizer knew what to fucking do.
By the way, looks like 83.
83, shit. So you got at least a few cooks keeping 83 people fed all day.
Yep, 81 humans, 1 Vulcan, and 1 Denobulan.
1 Denobulan. But anyways, T'Pol is in the mess drinking tea and reading, and Trip invites her to sit with him. And then T'Pol is annoyed that Trip is talking to him, and Trip doesn't seem to get the message that she doesn't really want to talk. And it's this really awkward kind of, I don't know, tete-a-tete between the two of them. But like, I think they're trying to give you the sense that like these two are kind of becoming friends, which does become relevant later.
Sure.
My note here is Trip cannot leave this woman alone. Christ.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Just trying to be friendly.
So the humans are very excited to scan the comet. T'Pol's like, it's a comet. Vulcans don't give a shit. They decide that the comet actually has a rare element called icilium, which I have written out as ice-silly-.
So I looked it up. It's EIS. So
I assume that's a Star Trek thing. It's not like a real like compound, right?
I don't know. I didn't go any further in my research.
Skin deep we are here.
We are hacks and frauds.
I just wanted to make sure that they weren't like just calling ice a fancy word.
Right. That's what it sounded like, right?
It definitely sounds like that.
Apparently they don't have a good way to get a sample from a thing, which seems silly to me. So they're going to send Reed and Travis down. I guess because the Actors Guild needed them to get paid this week, because really they didn't do much. But then another Vulcan ship shows up, and I don't know how much the writers got paid to write Vulcan humor, but it is fucking killing me every goddamn time. Because he comes on, he's like, "Are you lost?"
Yeah. I mean, he is just a giant dick right off the bat.
Hugely, hilariously funny every single time. And they're like, no, we're going to look at this comet. And the Vulcan gives basically like a little Vulcan, like, of course you are, silly human. So they decide to stay and watch, not the comet, but the humans watching the comet, which is the most condescending thing I've ever heard of.
My note here was, tee-hee, Vanek likes to watch.
Vanek wants to watch Archer explore that ball. So Archer doesn't like getting babysat, but like, what's he gonna fucking do about it, you know? Reed and Travis land on the comet. The 80-kilometer comet has basically Earth gravity, so that's convenient. And in the meantime, there's a secret message that just shows up in some buffer, and it's encrypted. And they find out that like it was headed for T'Pol, and they're like, what the hell? So they're going to decrypt it, which I guess just means they just punch it through the decryptomatic, which is not how encryption works. But
Well,
it'll get done eventually.
I mean, that's pretty much how encryption works on all TV shows. Are you telling me that's a lie?
Well, I think Rob would be better to speak on that.
Or not, whatever.
Did we lose Rob? Yeah, don't worry, Rob.
No, I don't know what to say there. I'm sorry. I have no idea how decryption works.
Rob's like, you put me on the spot, motherfucker. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Rob's like, I'm trying to find a big-ass prime number to multiply against something. I don't know what's going on. I don't know I don't know the specifics about how encryption works, but as I understand it, the idea is that, like, something gets encrypted to the point where it's like mathematically it would take like long enough, like till the heat and depth of the universe to compute all of the possibilities to decrypt this message.
Yeah, so like encryption and decryption, for that matter, on TV works just like hacking on TV.
Yeah, it's like the computer version of the word quantum. They just throw encryption into stuff and hope that it like makes sense.
I will say, like, usually, I know a little bit about encryption. So like you've usually got I don't know, I've usually heard it referred to as like a hash file that gets created that kind of is like a prime key for that file after you finish encrypting it. So like usually when somebody tells you it's going to take as long as the heat death of the universe to decrypt something, that's the absolute maximum value. There is some random chance involved. So like it could get really lucky and get it on the first try.
The computer tries like 0 and it's like, that was the key. You got it first try.
Worst encryption ever.
So they decrypt this message and it turns out it's something private. We will get back to that. My favorite moment in this episode is answering the kids' questions.
Yes,
and
best scene by far in the series so far.
I like this for a couple reasons. One, it is objectively funny.
Yes.
2, the actors do a good job here. And I don't know whether it's because, like, this is the kind of shit they have to deal with, like, as actors. But, like, or they're just really good at acting. But they all do a fantastic job here. I also really like this because I feel like it's very realistic.
Yeah, no, it is 100% real. Like the ISS broadcast to like children and stuff all the time.
And I'm actually my only point, like my only note on it was like, do they not do this constantly? Because I would assume they're doing this constantly.
Yeah, I feel like it would be like the ISS. You know, they're constantly doing broadcasts to and from Earth.
Right.
And like you see that stuff on YouTube all the time of like the astronauts up on the International Space Station, like recording videos back for, elementary school kids sometimes.
Right, exactly. So the kids they've got some questions from these kids that they have curated from a 4th grade class, okay? A 4th grade class in Ireland. So, first question, what do you eat? And that's where they kind of talk about how chef prepares pretty much the same shit that you eat on Earth. I will point out that Archer's like, we can make turkey with all the trimmings. It's Ireland. They don't eat that trash. That's American bullshit. No one else eats that. And that's not a like America's better than everyone because we eat turkey. It's the opposite. Like it's I don't like turkey that much.
Turkey. Like a good
What is
cooked,
wrong
a
with you?
well-cooked turkey. Like, good. A well-prepared turkey is delicious.
Okay.
The real reason we're the only ones that eat turkey is because we're the only country that has fucking turkeys.
Okay.
Yep, that's fair.
I appreciate that your epiglottis almost rebelled on you while you were saying that, Chris. I prepare the turkeys. I have been told to my face it's the best turkey anyone's ever had. And I'm like, it's turkey, whatever. Like, it's just not, I don't know. It's just, it's like eating just a flavorless sponge. You're going to cover in gravy, which is fine, but then I'll just eat gravy. I'd rather just eat mashed potatoes.
Please don't just eat gravy. That's terrible for you.
The best parts of the Thanksgiving dinner aren't healthy.
Yeah,
it's Kelsey's pineapple stuffing and then mashed potatoes covered in gravy.
I have to have this pineapple stuffing sometime. You guys have been talking that shit up every time.
It's so good.
It's basically pineapple upside down cake. And you get to eat it with dinner. Like I'm not gonna lie, it's a dessert that you eat with dinner,
right?
Yeah.
It's like super like sugary Jello and like marshmallows and pineapple chug. It's just dessert that people are calling a salad for it to be able to be on your dinner plate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the sherbet like course. It's like, oh, it's just a little dessert we have after an appetizer.
Yeah.
Okay, so the kids ask, "What do you eat?" They answer that. At the beginning of this, Trip is like, "Hey, can I just go engineer some shit?" And Archer's like, "No, fuck you. What? Stay here." And then a fourth grader asks them about dating. That's weird. Like I am currently the proud parent of a third grader. I would be very surprised if in a year he's going to ask any adults about how dating works.
I don't know, man. Like, girls in elementary school, like, I remember girls asking out guys in, like, third grade.
Yeah, but they don't know what they're doing.
I know my wife's first crush was in third grade. I don't remember his name, Derek or something like that, but he had a rat tail, and apparently that's the hottest thing that ever happened in 1998 or whatever. 1994.
Yeah, that time frame sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you skip the best part. Trip gets asked about space
I'm
poop.
just about to get there. Yes, Trip gets asked about so they get asked where their poop goes, which is a genuinely good question. And Trip acts like it's the worst thing that's ever happened. And first of all, man, they're kids. Can you not be such a spoil sport? But second of all, we actually learned something kind of interesting, is that they actually do have, to some degree, some kind of replicator technology, because he talked about how they turn their poop into resequenced molecules that they can then turn into like cargo containers and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, didn't they say it was
also,
like a protein resynthesizer?
He also mentioned, like Archer mentioned that when he was talking about the food. He mentioned that it can do resequence proteins for certain things too.
Right.
So.
Right. So we don't see the like next generation era like replicators, but there's definitely some kind of underlying similar technology going on. And then someone asks, how do you talk to aliens? And Hoshi gives a very nice, like obviously a teacher kind of answer.
Dude, real quick, I just want to say, it really sounds like Hoshi is a teacher when she's talking. Because, like, it was really funny and very... I don't know. They did a good job of, like, showing that Archer wasn't 100% comfortable in giving his responses. He was, like, a little stilted when he was talking with the kids. Hoshi, complete opposite. Super comfortable, just dives right into the topic, sounds really natural when she's doing it.
Yes.
That was pretty good.
Yes, she's good at educating. Yes, she did it. She was clearly the most comfortable on the bridge doing this. And then some kid asks, like, can microbes exist in space? Which is clearly the teacher just like threw that question in, but acted like it was from a kid. Most of the fourth graders asking that shit. And then Phlox goes into this very, very Floxian description, which starts out fantastic, but then gets way too detailed.
Yeah.
And Archer cuts him off, and then they're like, oh, goodbye. And then Archer's like, oh, thank God, that's the worst thing we've ever done. And it was a very charming few minutes of TV, and I really appreciate it.
I really like that. Yeah, I think it gives you a very different window into the characters than you've gotten in the other episodes, and just do the nature of the situations that we're seeing them in. So I think, that's one of the underrated things in any of the Star Treks is, I think, when we get those windows into the more, more real aspects of them as characters.
Yeah. I find that like seeing their day-to-day lives instead of just like when they're dealing with emergencies is more interesting. Yeah,
like there's a Deep Space Nine episode that opens with like Cisco just like cooking for like, a couple of the characters and everything like that. And like I remember watching that scene and like, oh, this is amazing. Like this is great. It's so fun to like see this other part of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Like Pike cooking for the crew.
Exactly.
Is probably that's some of the best parts of Strange New Worlds. The little get-togethers in the captain's cabins. I think that this show in particular has done a really good job of like grounding Star Trek. Like I really love the set design on the show. It's really cool to see the bridge. It looks functional. I like the uniforms that they wear. And like the one thing I noticed in this episode in particular, all of the computer screens look like computer screens. Like they don't look like huge honking computer decks. I don't even know how to describe it. They look practical.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Reed and Travis are doing some crap on the comet. They make a snowman because it's fun. Whatever. Anyways, back to the fun stuff. So the message is decrypted, and Hoshi's like, I ain't reading this thing. I ran through the decryptor, but you gotta translate it out of Vulcan. I'm not reading it. And Trip's like, I guess I'm gonna have to. And so he goes and immediately reads T'Pol's private message. It's very private. Apparently it's some sort of private matter that has nothing to do with anything important other than like something very private to her, which obviously we'll find out in a minute. Trip's justification as he's explaining to the captain that like, oh no, I read T'Pol's private message was like, if you act like you're hiding something, I'm gonna snoop. Like, you're to blame here. Like,
okay, so
I don't know, man.
I get it. Like, it's not like this is like a cruise ship that they're on, and it's not like she's even a regular member of the crew. Like, I get it.
Yeah, like this is as far as I am aware, it's at least a pseudo-military vessel.
Right. It is.
So like,
I don't know. My issue with Trip and my issue with all the humans dealing with this is like, she hasn't broken any rules that anyone mentions.
Well,
right?
So she did make some promise to the captain that she would alert him of any communication she's got with Vulcan. So there was a reason why he asked for it to be decrypted. And like the bigger issue I have with this whole situation is, why is Trip the one talking to her and not the captain?
Because he's her friend and we need something for Trip to do.
Yeah, I mean, they did share that unnecessarily erotic decon rubdown in that first episode. So.
That's how Vulcans make friends. Unnecessarily erotic decon rubdowns. Yes. So, anyways, Trip has to go talk to T'Pol. T'Pol is working very studiously at an engineering station next to crewman Chad, the beefiest person on the ship. Like this huge, like blonde, muscular dude. I originally had like, is that Ensign Chad? But then they called him crewman, so I guess it's crewman Chad. But they asked crewman Chad to leave. I'm not sure where this extra showed up from, or if he's just like, hey, we need someone to stand here. Go get one of those guys that carries our heavy shit for us. But this guy was huge.
Grab one of the grips. We'll do it.
Yeah,
Huge dude. And of course, T'Pol is not a large person. Like, the actor is fairly short and lithe. So, like, it's like a juxtaposition between this enormous, like, pile of meat and then T'Pol. So Trip's like, hey, y'all, sorry I read your letter. And T'Pol, in beautiful Vulcan T'Pol, is like, I have more letters in my quarters. Would you like to read those as well? In the same, like, tone as, like, perhaps you can meet her holograph parents.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's good shit.
Fucking hilarious. But she's like, whatever.
Also, by the way, just to step back a few minutes in the episode, I thought it was interesting where Archer was going to be like, was fine to just let it go. Like, he was like, nah, we don't have to tell her we looked at her shit. Who the fuck cares? And Trip was like the honest one. And he's like, no, I have to tell her. I'm going to be guilty. Archer's like, fuck that, bitch. I don't care.
Well, and I mean, to be fair, I actually would think that Archer's more correct. Or you know what? Actually, I don't know. Probably what I would say was, like, if I was captain, I would probably say something. If I was captain and I made the decision to decrypt it, which I'm not sure I would have in the first place, but assuming I already had, and I found out it was no big deal, I would go to T'Pol and be like, "Hey, we caught this weird message. It was weirdly encrypted. Apologies, but we cracked into it just to make sure it wasn't any kind of security risk. We understand now it's private. Can you please keep those messages in the, whatever channels, just so that we don't, run into this issue again. Like, that's the rule on the ship. Thank you." And, like, that's it. It doesn't have to be awkward, weird. Like, you just do that, But Archer's only a doer when it's shooting stuff.
No, man, just remember, they don't have any pre-written policies on anything. They're just seat of their pants in it.
Yeah, there's just so much like ink being spilled about like what policies they're writing as they're up there. We cut back to Travis and Reed. They're gonna blow up part of the comet so they can get down to the Icilium. I guess the best way to blow up part of a comet is to stand 3 or 4 feet away and do it, rather than like, I don't know, go back into space. But whatever. So they blow up a part of the comet. Yay. They invite Vanek, who is the captain of the Vulcan ship, over for dinner with the captain, which is just another delivery platform for Vanek's like snide like witticisms.
Yeah, he's a real jerk the whole
He's
time.
fucking hilarious.
He really is.
like Trip's like, wow. What's that ship get up to? Like 6.5? That's impressive. And Vanek's like, you're easily impressed. It's like, God damn, Vanek.
Yeah, it's just, just an asshole.
Right. Archer is a petulant little child pretty much the whole time. And then they ask him to lead.
Well, okay, hold on. In his defense, I mean, he is being a gigantic asshole directly to his face.
Yeah.
Like, listen, I do not like Archer. I do not like the character of Archer. He was 100% justified in his response. He may have gone over the top.
Disagree for one specific reason. Okay? Because the reason he invited him to dinner was to have this out. Not in any kind of polite capacity.
Okay.
So Vanek knows this. Vanek is not stupid.
Fair,
he knows
however.
this. So he's just being a dick because the humans were already being dicks to him.
No, because he showed up and is watching them. It's not like he's supposed to be
and
there.
if the lab mice invite you to dinner, you're allowed to be an asshole to them. That's how it works.
Yeah, no, he's not justified in this at all. Archer was right to be a dick to him, just as he was being a dick.
Anyways, Archer has the other crewman, Chad, show up. This one's a brunette, and he is also a huge gentleman. I don't know if they're brothers. They're like identically huge dudes.
It's Brad and Chad, yes.
Oh, okay, got it. Huge dude. Vanek says something in Vulcan to Paul, which I meant to look up whether or not that actually meant anything. But she's upset. So...
Yes. By the way, I am upset we did not learn what was said there.
Yeah. Anyways, I think I know. We'll get back to it in a moment. Brad takes him away. Let's see. Oh no, the comet's going to be in the sun because they blew up part of it. Now it's slowly rotating. Drama. All right, back to the fun stuff. So
I will say that was pretty clever.
The rotating thing.
Yeah, that was a good way to like make this a problem. Although it is kind of weird to me that their EV suits melt in the sun. Like, our astronauts get hit with direct sunlight when they're working outside of the space station all the time. I don't understand why this is such a big deal.
I don't know that... Did they say that the EV suits were going to melt? I thought the EV suits were fine. I thought it was just the issue is the ice would melt underneath them.
No, they said that it was like going to heat up by several hundred degrees.
By a couple hundred degrees, yeah. I don't know. I thought they just said it'd be uncomfortable, but maybe these are the cold weather EV suits with like the muffs and stuff.
Maybe.
So, anyways, back to the good stuff. Trip and so T'Pol is like, well, Phlox tells T'Pol earlier, like, you should find someone to talk to. And T'Pol's like, well, best I got is Trip. Like, theoretically, because they're kind of becoming friends, but mostly because he already knows what's going on because he read her fucking letter that she's like, well, I guess I'll just talk to him about it, which is a real weird but understandable justification. Mm-hmm. But Trip's like, can't you talk to someone else? Somebody else with breasts. Like, he can't not suggest a woman to her to talk to about something that is, mind you, completely ungendered. It's just like a marriage issue.
Yeah.
It's like I want to put off our wedding, but they don't want to put off our wedding. And then we get into this weird fucking Vulcan tradition of arranged marriages that I find baffling. Like,
this is like we talked about the other episode where they went to the Vulcan temple, right? They're just so, like, there's such this dichotomy between what they're supposed to be and then all these fucking weird ass traditions they have.
Right. But like, there's a distinct difference even amongst like a people who are so wrought with tradition. There is a distinct difference between like, our monasteries are very important, go get your souvenir rock, whatever, and my parents made an arrangement to get married with someone that I am required to then form a loving relationship with as an adult, but when I'm a child. That is so antithetical to anything that the Vulcans seem to stand for. Like, there's no consent. It's just fucking weird. It's fucking weird.
Yeah, no arguments here. I feel like I just make up stuff sometimes.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Yeah, the arranged marriage thing is... I don't like it. I don't like that trope in general because I find it very problematic. But I find it especially weird here because it doesn't... That's the wrong species to have that. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, no arguments here. I agree.
T'Pol is very bad at receiving advice, even though she asked for it. Cut back to the asteroid. God forbid we have any like ice climbing equipment when we're climbing all over the ice. So Travis slips and I don't know, bangs his knee. It was a weird injury, but he's limping.
It's that dang icilium hypergravity.
I was gonna say my notes were Mayweather hurts himself like a blonde girl breaking a heel in a horror movie.
Oh no. So they gotta stumble back to the shuttle. They make it back to the shuttle, but the sun's now on that side of the comet, which insta melts the ice to the point where they fall down a small crevasse, which is the technical term because a crevasse is a crevice in ice.
Also, how are we 8 episodes in and this exact scene has already happened twice?
But this time they're going to use the grappling hook.
Epic.
Yeah, I think they just used the same CGI and just made it white. Yeah.
Did they just change the terrain color?
I just want to remind our listeners that this is a full 8-9 years after Jurassic Park. And that's the best they can do.
95 to 2001, so 6 years, yeah.
93.
93. No, that's right. 93. Shit. So they're gonna fire a grappler to get them. The grappler apparently has a fuck of a range because they're like, move 50 meters closer so I can get a better shot. 50 meters is a lot of cable.
It's a big spool.
Yeah, I guess so. Two of them too, because it's got the double shot. We're all in on this fucking shuttle pod at this point. Trip fires 2 grapplers. One of them connects. He's like, it'll be fine. Then the maglock starts getting disrupted by the icilium, which that's not how magnets work, but whatever. Like, okay. It's literally the first the icilium has ever been mentioned about interfering with any kind of electronic devices, but it's going to interfere with this. So they fall again. And the Vulcan ship's like, hey, we got a tractor beam. You want us to just like get them real quick? And Archer's like, no, my pride. And then Hoshi's like, they're going to die. Knock it off.
Right.
Yeah.
And Archer's like, all right, fine. And then they get him out with the tractor beam and that works.
Save people's lives. Good.
And the end,
it was T'Pol too. It wasn't just Hoshi.
That's right, T'Pol, yes. But in the end, T'Pol decides that she is not going to go through with the marriage that was arranged for her because she wants to stay on board the Enterprise, which was very nice. And she's also going to eat some pie, which is where we leave the episode.
You didn't mention that Vanek was still a dick.
Yeah, on the way out the door.
Yeah, but like I don't know. I'm kind of Team Vanek here. I think Vanek's fine.
No,
I mean you're a dick too, so that makes sense.
He is the Vulcan Archer. That is what we will refer to Vanek.
No, he's not as nearly as much of a doer as Archer.
That's fair. Yeah.
All right, that was entirely too long because this episode was so fun. So we need to take a quick break, and we will be back with the deep dive. We are back. Okay, so for the deep dive, I wanted to talk about something that we is kind of tangentially related to something we talked about in the second episode of our podcast. I believe that was episode 2, but my memory sucks. Where we talked about how Star Trek has correctly or incorrectly, has either correctly presaged or inspired technologies that ended up actually coming around. I wanted to talk about today Star Trek, but also other science fictions getting stuff wrong, like drastically wrong. Okay. And that it was kind of inspired by the whole, like, this is the biggest comet that's ever been seen. Like, they immediately got that wrong, like within the year.
I'd say the one that jumps to mind immediately is, Back to the Future, right? Where they predicted the flying cars by, when was that, like 4 years ago they predicted flying cars by?
Yeah, and hoverboards.
Yeah.
And I don't know, and I don't know if it's because of, in fact, I guarantee it is. It's because of the fact that we happen to live at the turn of the millennium, which to human brains feels like a really important date, even though, like, it's not, it's just another year, right? But because of 2000 feeling like such a hugely futuristic date to everybody back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, we get all these predictions for what life is going to be like in these years that have either already gone by or are coming up really quick. And, the classic obvious example is 2001, right? 2001, we're in space. We're going to Jupiter. There's an AI that's killing everyone. None of that.
I mean, give the AIs a few more years. Have you seen those Boston Robotics videos?
Oh, God.
Yeah, you can kick them and they don't fall down. We're all doomed.
My favorite of the, like, parody videos where the one person gave the one, like, a gun and started shooting everybody.
Yeah.
Because they kept knocking him over with hockey sticks and he got pissed. Oh man, those are good times. But obviously, like, 2001 was 21 years ago. Okay. Instead of, like, a computer spoiling a mission out in space, they may not have been going to Jupiter in that one. They were going to the moon. Jupiter was it 2031 or whatever, the sequel. Like, instead of that, it was like, I don't know, less advanced. We didn't even have iPhones yet. Like,
yeah.
And it's interesting when we look at things where they got stuff right and then immediately got it wrong. Like, in George Orwell's 1984, he got a lot of stuff right about how, like, technology will eventually be. But in 1984, I guess to George Orwell, that felt very far into the future. 84 was before we were born.
Right.
Is there anything, like, can you guys remember anything specifically from, because I have examples from other science fiction that I found on, like, a site, but can you guys think of anything from Star Trek specifically that they, like, got wrong?
I'm trying to think of, like, times they, like, went back in time.
Sure.
That it would be more relevant to our own reality time frame.
Right.
And I mean, some of the stuff seems like it's heading that way. Like, do you remember that the one where Cisco, like, goes back to, like, the riots and stuff, and like, we're not that far off from that.
I think that,
go ahead, Rob.
like, one of the things that Roddenberry was very careful of in the original series, and I feel like they have continued on with, is aside from doing a pretty good job of just avoiding the topic of religion for the most part, they were pretty vague on what exactly happens to Earth. Like, you don't even really know what the governing body is on Earth for most of Star Trek. It's not even really brought up. Like, about Starfleet, like the cooperative effort between humanity and the other species that they've allied themselves with the Federation. But, like, aside from some talks about the eugenics wars, like, you don't really hear a whole lot.
Right, and actually the eugenics wars was one of the examples I had, because the eugenics wars was supposedly in the late 90s, right? Because that shit came up in the original series in the 60s.
That was going to be what I proffered.
Yeah, and to be honest, like, they almost, like, we did map the human genome in the 90s, like the late 90s, right? But maybe early 90s.
Yeah.
But Like the idea that
what was
we were gonna make super soldiers that would end up like being like horrifying. Like no.
That you know of.
There's also a lot of, and this isn't as much in Star Trek, although a lot of the people who consume Star Trek will remember this kind of stuff. There's a lot of like Cold War era predictions that are like did not even remotely manifest. A lot of it involving like, did the communists end up taking over? Or in terms of like the alien universe, I don't know how aware you are of the extended kind of aliens universe, but like the Cold War continued into space. So like there's a Russian kind of faction in space as well as the, Weyland-Yutani corporate capitalist faction. Right. And that happens in several fictions where, the communism thing just kind of like the Cold War keeps going forever. Which is obviously a symptom of like living in the Cold War, surrounded by constant propaganda about it, and that's just what influenced it.
I feel like one show that kind of nailed that antagonism between the U.S. and Russia that's continued on was Stargate, like Stargate SG-1.
Sure.
That was good, especially when they got the second gate and Russia's like, "This is our gate now."
Yeah.
Look at me.
So the other like kind of mass predictions that we always get thrown out, flying cars, don't got that yet. Civilian use of space still isn't really a thing.
I mean, unless you're a fucking billionaire who wants to shoot his penis into space.
I mean, I will say, like, satellites, those little CubeSats are absurdly affordable for, like, corporations to just buy their own now. To the point where it's going to become a problem soon because we're going to have a ton of space junk.
Oh, we are, yeah. Consumer robotics that are more than just like a novelty, like robots that help us around the house and stuff. Haven't really manifested. To some extent, sure, we got things like Roomba, which is funny because like Fifth Element, that's the kind of robot they had in a Fifth Element, right? He had those like Roomba things that came out and took care of his glass. Like that's feasible, and actually, I would say like that's pretty much what we have. A Roomba could do all that shit. There's even mopping ones now. But the idea that you would have like a robot like, Fallout's Mr. Handy or, like any of the nanny bots and stuff that exist in all these other fictions. Like,
okay, the Mr. Handy though, I don't know who on earth would want that in their home. Like that thing is kicking out fire behind it to stay afloat.
I think that's
it has
the
a
joke.
saw blade for an arm.
Well, you can get different models. Some of them have lasers.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's Mr. Gutsy.
I feel like I would.
That's Mr. Gutsy, okay?
No, Mr. Gutsy just has a different voice.
I feel like I would have to like get some oversized kitchen like pot handlers to put around the freaking saw blade and all of those things before I would feel safe.
Other common ones, cure for cancer is always a big one because how cancer is just like one disease we're going to cure someday. And cure for the common cold is a weirdly popular one that you see a lot. You do see that in Star Trek too every once in a while. It's like, oh, you got a common cold. Here, take this. You'll be fine tomorrow or whatever. Which is funny because again, like, no, we don't have a cure. It's a virus. Like you just fucking let it wait out or whatever.
You take something for the symptoms and it's gone in 2 to 3 days.
Or you die.
Or you're dead forever. Consumer level nuclear power is not a thing, even remotely. The idea that like you would be able to buy a nuclear powered anything is kind of a holdover from like the golden era of science fiction when everyone thought atomic power was so awesome because we hadn't really figured out that radiation would fucking kill everybody.
Well, that's I think that's kind of the fun thing with like the Fallout universe, right? It's like, what if we went the way of nuclearization for everything instead of miniaturization and using microchips and things like that. So,
and like relatedly, fusion is like constantly just around the corner, right? Like we've been 10 to 20 years from fusion for about 40 years now. And
that is very true.
That one's always a solved problem in science fiction, like at any year now.
Well, I feel like it's almost a necessity when you're talking about like a star hopping civilization. Like you need an absurd amount of power available to make it feasible.
Right. And I'm not saying like we're not going to someday have fusion. It's the idea that we had fusion in 2012 or whatever, you know?
Oh,
it's those kinds of predictions that I find very interesting. And kind of closing out the segment too, I'm listening to a podcast right now called Dust. It's got like 4 seasons. It's an anthology science fiction podcast. So like each episode are individual stories. They're not like a long form story. And season 2 is like, there's an airplane. It's kind of Langoliers, but the opposite. There's an airplane that goes through a wormhole without realizing it. And they end up 20 years in the future. Okay, that's the whole premise. And so each of the episodes is like one of the passengers and something about, like, it's a story about them coming to this future, right? And they're describing what the world is like in 2040. And it is, I'm enjoying the show. I really like it. There's no fucking way any of this is going to happen. It's staggeringly future, like far future stuff is happening within the next 20 years. And it's one of those things where like I was operating under the assumption that like we're not naive enough like we were in the 60s, like we were in the 50s and the 40s and the 30s. Like it is 2022. We know how computers work. We know how they evolve. We know how they build upon themselves over time. We are not naive enough in 2022 to think that by 2040, we're going to have AIs running every aspect of government.
I think that you are way too generous of 2022 humanity.
I guess like, and maybe it's because but you're talking about people who write science fiction, right? Like these are people who should theoretically have a better grasp of like, what kinds of things will happen in the next 20 years. Because that's like their job. So I find it very interesting. And don't get me wrong, like this isn't it's not like they're sponsoring us. I think the podcast may have died because their last episode was like 11 months ago and there doesn't seem to have been any kind of follow-up. It was like in the middle of the season. So I think it's dead. But it's a great podcast. I'm really enjoying it. The first season was a lot of like classic and contemporary short stories. There was a Bradbury story in there. Great podcast. Cool. But you could have gone forward in time a little bit further because 20 years is not enough to make all these drastic, super awesome changes. There's no cash anymore. Everyone's got smart glasses. I don't know. Anyways, that's what I got. We're going to take a quick break and we will come back with whoever's got Potpourri this week.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to Section 3, Potpourri. I don't know that we have an official name for this bit yet, but so this week it kind of worked out. I was a little worried. I don't know how much time we'll be able to flesh out of this suggestion, but turns out it's been a pretty long-winded one already anyway, so maybe it's for the best. I don't know. We'll see. So I wanted to hear from you guys, and I can start off first because I have the advantage of knowing what this question is going to be ahead of time. What is your fondest real-life experience that has stemmed from Star Trek? And I can go first if you want an example.
Oh yeah, you're definitely going to have to go first.
Okay. give you guys some time to prep here. So my fondest memory is actually my first real exposure to the Star Trek universe. I remember I was, oh God, I don't know, like 5, 6, 7 years old. It was young. We went over to my grandparents' house. My grandmother used to babysit me because my parents worked night shift. She had this really old TV. I mean, old that like it didn't have a remote. Like it just had knobs on the side of it, and it only got the local channels. I think it was on NBC. I don't remember, but we flipped to it one night after dinner, and Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan is on it. And my dad loved Star Trek. Like he watched it when he was a kid. It's always been like a part of his life. Huge fan of the original series. So he gets really excited to see this. And my grandmother, knowing nothing about this, except she just saw some Scottish gentleman talking in a Starfleet uniform. So she was all of a sudden interested. Like we sit down and we start watching this for the first time in my entire life. And I was like immediately hooked. And it was great because like I didn't really have a whole lot of things in common to talk about with my dad when I was a kid. Like I liked baseball, but I gravitated towards Philadelphia teams, whereas he grew up like on New York teams. So like we didn't really watch the same games because again, you just grew up different, I guess. I don't know. But like being able to talk about Star Trek and getting exposed to this, and then him then going out of his way to like introduce me to the original series, and then my uncle being like, oh, you like Star Trek, here's the Next Generation. Like that's how it all got started for me. And it just felt like a very wholesome moment in my childhood to get to share that with my dad.
I can go next if you want.
Yeah, you fucking better, because Rob's just got this beautiful moment, and I'm like, I don't know, I used to watch it every week. Shit.
Yeah, so my first exposure to Star Trek was Next Generation, and much like Rob's stories, with my family, I had, when I was a kid, I was probably, I don't know, 7, 8, something like that, and back when we had to, watch TV live, I had a bedtime, but if I didn't say anything and they were watching the show, they would let me stay up as long as I was quiet and watch the show with them. I could stay up later, and in doing so, I got to know Star Trek, and kind of my mom was always the bigger Star Trek fan because I remember during the summers when she wasn't, before she started working, she would iron clothes and stuff. And she'd have recorded VHS tapes of Next Generation Star Trek, and she would put those on as she was ironing. And I'd be doing whatever in the house, and I'd find myself, taking a seat and watching it with her as she ironed, and we'd watch grainy VHS tapes of Next Generation Star Trek, and that's what springs to mind for me.
It's funny to me that you say that, like, you would, if you were quiet, you could stay up late. Because like we're pretty much the same age, so I know when you were talking about, and it was on like Saturday nights, and it came on like the time my usual bedtime was. So like Saturday nights, I was allowed to stay up an hour later to watch Next Generation. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Or maybe Friday nights, but it was like one of those weekend nights.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't have a memory of the first time I watched Star Trek, because my family, my parents were into it well before I was born. Right. So like, I remember watching Next Generation as a kid, but I don't remember the first time I watched it because we just watched it. I remember when like DS9 debuted, because like we watched, my parents and I watched the pilot like when it was broadcast. The best thing I've got, trying to think. So we lived in Kansas City. This is when my parents were still together, because they split when I was almost 10. So that would have been 94, 95. I think it was Thanksgiving of 94 is when my parents got divorced. So I think either a year or two before that, we went to a Star Trek convention. And this was back when, like, conventions now are mainstream in a way that they were not at the time. So, like, the cliche, like, everyone's dressed up as a Klingon or wearing Vulcan ears and shit, absolutely true. Back in 1992, okay, in the Kansas City, convention center. They were. It may have been in St. Louis too. I don't remember if we drove to it. But like classic Star Trek convention. And I was 7, 8 years old maybe. And I remember walking around this convention with my parents. My mom bought some Spock ears to wear, and the reason I remember is because Gates McFadden was like a guest speaker. And she plays Dr. Crusher.
The Crusher.
Yes. And so
okay.
she came to this convention, and Next Generation was filmed in California. The actors obviously live in California. So she came, this convention must have been like February, March timeframe. And she said it had snowed like the day before. And so she's like, wow, I haven't seen snow in years. And my son, who's like 14, this is his first time seeing snow because I brought him with me. And I remember this moment for 2 reasons. One, that was weird to me that someone had not seen snow before. Especially someone like that I kind of vaguely knew, even though obviously I didn't. But like, hey, it's Dr. Crusher. She's never seen fucking snow before. What are you talking about? But 2, I remember thinking that her son was Wesley Crusher and not whoever Gates McFadden's son is. So I remember going like, huh. Wow, Wesley's never seen snow. That's interesting. And I wasn't stupid. I knew that he wasn't really they weren't really flying in space and going warp whatever. I knew that stuff. I knew it was an actor. But in my brain, I hadn't made the connection that the actor who was playing Wesley Crusher was not actually Gates McFadden's son. So that springs to mind as like the most memorable first like real life moment that is vaguely Star Trek related.
That's very Star Trek related, I would say.
Yeah, well, yeah. I guess.
You win. Although, that is the most Star Trek.
Oh man, I did do. Did y'all ever do the Las Vegas Star Trek experience thing?
Nope.
No.
I did that when I was in middle school. That was fun. That was a fun time. It was very cheesy, but like in a good Las Vegas-y way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, like I don't know. I mean, I have plenty of memories of just like eating dinner while watching Star Trek with my mom and my stepdad, like watching Voyager and stuff. Like we watch Star Trek all the goddamn time. So
good old Star Trek, bringing families together.
I think Undiscovered Country was the first movie I saw in the movie theater, like first Star Trek movie I saw in the movie theater.
Huh. Because
that had to be like early 90s, right? Mid 90s? Anyways, it's not as touching as Rob's, but I guess that counts. I don't know.
It does. No, that was perfect. So thank you both for sharing some wholesome Star Trek moments. I think that'll wrap us up for the week.
Alrighty. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Captain's Log Supplemental. You can follow us on Twitter at PodCLS or send us hate mail at podcls3@gmail.com.